I was about 7 seconds away from sending Derek a fake emergency text and going home. My car was still running, both hands on the wheel. I had pulled into the parking lot of Harlow's Bistro 14 minutes early because I told myself being early was the responsible thing to do. The honest version? I had been sitting here with the engine idling, staring at that front door like it personally offended me. Couples walked in. A group of women already mid-laugh before they even touched the handle. Everyone moving like they had somewhere to be, someone waiting, a reason to walk through a door without dreading it. I did not feel like any of those people. My buddy Derek had spent 3 full weeks engineering this moment. 3 weeks of texts during my lunch break. 3 weeks of him leaning over my desk at work with that face he gets when he's convinced he already knows how something ends. His theory, stated often and without invitation, was that I had been living too deep inside my own head and not enough in the actual world, and that the solution was simple and I was being stubborn for not just doing it. I said yes somewhere in week 2. Mostly so he'd stop texting me during meetings. I was running out of ways to silently vibrate my phone without the person across the table noticing. What Derek didn't know, or maybe what he suspected and wasn't saying out loud, was that I wasn't exactly starting from zero. There was already someone. Had been for most of the past year. Her name was Brooke. She worked 2 floors above me at Carver and Associates, something in brand strategy, and I had been quietly aware of her the way you notice a song playing in the next room. You're not chasing it. You just catch yourself listening every time it starts up again. Sharp mind. Dry humor. A laugh that arrived out of nowhere and disappeared before you had time to react to it. We had talked maybe 12 times total. Near the coffee station, once in the elevator, and once at a company lunch where we ended up at the same end of a long table and spent 40 minutes arguing about whether a movie adaptation could ever actually be better than the book it came from. She said yes. I said only if you hadn't read the book first. She said that was exactly the kind of answer she would expect from someone who alphabetizes his bookshelf. Which I do. I still have no idea how she knew that. I thought about her more than made any sense for someone who hadn't given me a concrete reason to. That was the frustrating part. She wasn't unfriendly, just not warm in any particular direction. Interested one moment, not there the next. Nothing to grab onto except the fact that I kept noticing. And feelings with nothing underneath them have a funny way of making you feel ridiculous about yourself. Which was Derek's whole case. If I was spending this much mental energy on someone who seemed to be going nowhere, the logical move was to try meeting someone new. So here I was, parked, engine running, staring at a door. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Derek, you're sitting in the parking lot, aren't you? Not a question. I typed back that I was just finding a spot. He sent an eye roll emoji and 4 words. Get in there. Go. I checked myself in the rearview mirror. Collar slightly crooked. I fixed it. Still looked like a man building a case for why he should leave, which was accurate. But Derek was my oldest friend and I had said I would do this, and I don't go back on things I tell people I'll do. I grabbed my jacket off the back seat and got out before my brain could finish whatever argument it was constructing. Outside was properly cold. The kind that reaches your face before the rest of you adjusts. I crossed the parking lot with my hands in my pockets and pulled open the front door of Harlow's Bistro before I could find a reason not to. The host greeted me near the entrance. I gave my name, said I was waiting for someone. He walked me to a corner booth near the back. Low ceiling, warm light, the kind of tucked-away table that felt like it had been chosen deliberately. Derek must have called ahead and requested it. I gave him that one. I sat down. 6:58. 2 minutes early. I ordered a club soda just to have something to hold. The restaurant was full and warm around me. Soft jazz from somewhere I couldn't locate. Candles on every table. That particular Friday night energy that makes everyone around you look like they have their life sorted. 7 came and went. 7:10. 7:15. I checked my phone 3 times. Nothing from Derek. No unknown number. He had been deliberately vague about the whole setup since the beginning. Just show up, he kept telling me. I texted him 20 minutes ago asking if everything was still on, and he hadn't replied, which was odd for someone who normally responds in under a minute. 7:20. The bartender quietly refilled my club soda without making eye contact. Either professional courtesy or the polite version of looking away from someone visibly falling apart. The ice in my first glass had mostly melted. I watched it finish the job. I didn't even have her name. That was the part that kept nagging at me. Not a name. Not a photo. Nothing but Derek's word and a table for two that was currently a table for one, while the Friday crowd moved around me like I wasn't there. 7:42. I made a deal with myself. 8 o'clock. If no one showed by 8, I would leave with at least some dignity intact. 7:53. The front door opened. I glanced up. Same reflex I'd had every single time that door had moved in the past hour. And then I went completely still. Every thought I'd been running just stopped. It was Brooke. She came through the door pulling her scarf off with one hand. Her hair wind-tossed from outside. Eyes moving across the restaurant the way someone does when they've just arrived somewhere and aren't fully oriented yet. Still in her work coat, bag slung over one shoulder with the strap slightly twisted, like she'd grabbed it on her way out the door. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. My brain offered two explanations at the same time. First, she was meeting someone here. This was Harlow's on a Friday. Half the city had the same idea. Second, she was about to spot whoever she was actually meeting walk straight past my booth, and that would be a completely normal thing to happen, and I would sit here and leave at 8 as planned. She scanned the room, past the bar, past the couple near the window, past the table of 4 along the far wall. Then her eyes landed on me. She didn't look surprised. She raised one eyebrow, just barely, like something had confirmed a thought she'd already had. Then she walked straight over. "You've been here a while," she said. "About an hour." I said it before I had time to think of something better. An hour. She pulled off her coat, hung it on the hook at the side of the booth, and sat down across from me like she had planned on ending up there. I waited for the part where she explained she was grabbing a quick drink before finding whoever she was actually meeting. That part never came. "My phone died right after I left the office," she said, tucking her bag in beside her. I had the address written on a notepad, but apparently there are 2 streets in this neighborhood with almost identical names. I spent 20 minutes standing outside the wrong building before a woman walking her dog took pity on me and pointed me toward the right one. Then the rideshare I called got stuck behind a catering delivery on Callaway and the driver, and I just sat there for 10 minutes not moving. She exhaled. "I ran the last 3 blocks. I looked at her. "You were coming here," I said. "Obviously." She said it the way you say something to someone being a little slow on the uptake. "I ran because I thought you were probably already gone. I thought you weren't coming at all." Something shifted in her face, a quieting around the edges. "No," she said. "I was absolutely coming." We sat with that for a moment. The restaurant kept going around us. Someone at the bar laughed. The jazz played on, soft and unaware. She flagged down the server before I'd worked out what to do with what she just said. We looked at menus. Ordered. The ordinary routine of it, something to focus on, something to do with my hands, gave me about 60 seconds to catch up. What I was still trying to piece together was the full shape of it. She had known it was me. Derek hadn't run a standard blind date. He had gone 2 floors up at our own office, found Brooke specifically, and arranged this on purpose. She had said yes knowing who was going to be sitting at this table. She had run 3 blocks in her work clothes to get here. "Did you know?" I asked. "When Derek told you, did he say who?" "He said it was someone I already knew." She turned her wine glass once on the tablecloth. "And that I probably already had an opinion about you." "What opinion?" She didn't answer that. "He also said you'd be more nervous than you looked." "I'm not nervous. You've checked the door 4 times since I sat down." I hadn't realized I was still doing it. Old reflex from the waiting. I made myself stop. "Okay, a little nervous." She smiled at that. Not the composed, professional version I'd seen in meetings and hallways. Something smaller. Something that felt like it belonged to an actual person and not a work setting. "Me too," she said. "I hadn't expected that. I left it sitting between us because I didn't know what else to do with it." We talked. That was the part that stayed with me later. Not even that she'd shown up. Not that she'd known it was me and come anyway. It was how effortless the conversation was once it started. Like we'd both been storing things up and hadn't realized it until now. She told me she'd nearly left Carver 6 months ago. Interviewed somewhere else because she felt like she was doing genuinely good work that no one with any real authority ever looked at. I told her I knew exactly that feeling, the version where you do everything correctly and somehow still feel like you're moving through the whole thing invisible. She nodded, and it wasn't just politeness. It was recognition. My phone buzzed on the table. I almost ignored it. Derek. Wait, has Brooke shown up yet? Been in a dead zone all night, just got signal back. Please tell me she's there. I looked up from the screen. Brooke was watching me with the quiet patience of someone who already knows what the message says. I read it once more. Looked back at her. Derek set me up with you specifically, I said slowly. She gave me a careful, small smile. You really didn't know? I genuinely thought this was a blind date with a stranger. She laughed, just a little, and glanced down at her glass. He told me you wouldn't agree to it if you knew it was me. And you came anyway. She looked right at me across the table. Didn't look away. I came anyway. I put my phone face down and left it there for the rest of the night. We stayed at Harlow's until the kitchen closed. Past 10, the restaurant quieter now, and neither of us had reached for our coats. Outside, the cold hit all at once after all that warmth. The street was still alive around us, cars and people and the normal noise of a Friday, completely unaware of what had just happened in that corner booth. We stood on the sidewalk. Neither of us said anything for a second. I barely ate, Brooke said. I was so nervous I kind of just moved food around my plate. I had about 4 bites, I said. I was convinced for the last hour that I was being stood up. She winced. Sorry. You ran 3 blocks. I did run 3 blocks. A block and a half north there was a diner I had walked past probably 50 times without ever going in. We looked at each other and somehow that was where we went. Fluorescent lights, vinyl booths, a coffee maker behind the counter that sounded like it had been through a lot. Laminated menus with photographs of everything. The waitress called us both Han before we had even taken our coats off, and she absolutely meant it. We ordered fries and coffee that neither of us needed at that hour. The diner was everything Harlow's wasn't, and maybe that was exactly why it worked. No jazz, no candles, no sense that the room had expectations. Just a plate of fries delivered faster than seemed physically possible, and Brooke dropping her scarf on the seat beside her like she'd been coming here for years. She told me about a relationship that had ended about 2 years before. Someone she genuinely cared about who needed her to be more available than she knew how to be, and how she'd spent a long time afterward wondering whether she was just someone who was better at her job than she was at people. She said it simply, no performance in it, like something she had gotten used to living alongside. I told her about the careful, small way I'd been moving through life for a while. Not asking for much, not saying what I actually wanted out loud, because wanting things loudly had always felt like lining yourself up for disappointment. I'd gotten good enough at low-setting everything that I'd started to lose track of what I'd been saying no to. We didn't solve anything. We weren't trying to. The coffee was genuinely bad. The fries went cold. We didn't leave until almost 1 in the morning. I walked her back to her building. 3 blocks from the diner, which she pointed out was slightly funny given the evening we'd had and its relationship with distances and wrong streets. We stopped outside her door. She turned to face me. The bookshelf thing, I said. At that company lunch. How did you actually figure that out? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. You brought up filing systems in a casual conversation without any prompting. Nobody does that unless they have some kind of system at home they're quietly proud of. That's a significant leap. Was I wrong? I didn't say anything. She smiled. Good night. Good night. She went inside. I stayed on the sidewalk for a moment that ran a little longer than it needed to, not thinking about anything specific, just standing there in the cold with something new sitting in my chest. Something that hadn't quite decided what it was yet. Something that felt like it might stay. I walked back to my car at Harlow's, got in, and sat with the engine off for a few minutes. Didn't touch my phone. Just let the night be what it had been. Then I drove home. What came after was not simple and it was not fast. Anyone who has ever tried to build something with a person they also share a building with knows there is an extra weight on everything. A text sent at 10 at night and then you're counting the minutes before the reply. You pass each other near the elevators and the nod is different now, carrying the private knowledge of late-night diners and conversations that went somewhere real. You're both performing normal for the same audience, and you both know it. We kept seeing each other slowly, the way you test unfamiliar ground. About 2 weeks after Harlow's, she came over on a Sunday with coffee and the book she told me I needed to read before I was allowed to have any more opinions about adaptations. We spent most of that afternoon on the couch, her reading, me working on a report I kept almost finishing, not talking much. It wasn't what I'd expected. It was actually better. Just being in the same room without needing to fill it up with something. 3 weeks in, she called me on a Tuesday evening at 9. Her upstairs neighbor's bathroom had flooded, and the water had come through her ceiling into the living room. Her rug was soaked, and she was standing in it with a mop she wasn't entirely sure how to use. I drove over. We moved furniture, rolled up the wet rug between us, found a standing fan in her closet and aimed it at the floor. The situation was genuinely awful, and somehow we spent most of it laughing at things that weren't actually that funny, which is its own kind of indicator. At some point, sitting on her hardwood floor with the fan roaring and a damp rug leaning against the wall, she looked over at me. "You didn't have to come." "I know. Thank you." "Yeah, of course." She held my eyes for a second, then went to get more paper towels. About 6 weeks after the first date, she brought up the work situation herself. That was Brooke, direct about things she needed to be direct about. Same company, different departments, no management overlap between us. But the same building, the same people, the same Friday all-staff events where someone would eventually notice something. We both understood the stakes. "I've been thinking about the work situation," she said one evening. Takeout containers open on my kitchen table between us. "Me too. And you're okay with it?" "I think it could get complicated," I said. "I also think letting that be the reason not to try is the same as sitting in my car in that parking lot." I looked at her. I spent enough time sitting in that parking lot. She thought about that, picked up her fork. "Okay," she said. "Just okay." And that was genuinely the end of it. About 4 months in, we walked along the river after dinner. No agenda, just direction. She was talking about a project at work that she'd invested real effort in and kept watching get bumped down the priority list by people above her. I was listening, and also watching the way she talked when she actually cared about something. Different from her professional register. Faster. Her hands moved more. She caught me watching and stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "Nothing. Keep going." "You were staring." "I was paying attention. They look the same sometimes." She gave me a dry look, then kept talking. But she was smiling while she did it. We stopped near a railing above the water. City lights across the river, the sound of traffic behind us. She leaned on the rail. I stood next to her, close enough that our arms were touching. "I'm not great at this," she said. "Just stating a fact." "Neither am I." "I'm trying though." "So am I." She didn't say anything else. Neither did I. We stayed there until the cold made it impractical. She caught a cab home. I walked back to my car and sat in it for a minute before starting the engine. That Friday felt different from all the ones before it. Couldn't have told you why exactly, just that it did. November came in quietly, the way trouble usually does. She didn't cancel plans exactly. She just made them smaller. Conversations that used to run long came back in 2 or 3 words. "Fine. Tired. Maybe." She still showed up when we had things scheduled, but she was slightly somewhere else when she did, like part of her was watching the situation from a distance rather than being inside it. I noticed. I didn't push, because I had been listening that night in the diner when she told me what had unraveled the last relationship she'd actually cared about. I knew that pressure was exactly the wrong tool here. But holding back while something that matters to you quietly shifts is not the same as doing nothing. Cost something. Every day. I called Derek on a Wednesday night. Told him what had been going on. He actually listened all the way through, which told me he thought it was serious. Derek solves problems before you're done describing them unless he's genuinely worried. When he's genuinely worried, he gets quiet. "Just say the thing to her," he said when I finished. What thing? You know what thing? I don't really know what. Yes, you do. Stop thinking about it. Just say it. I sat on that for 2 days. Thursday. Then Friday morning I texted her and asked if she wanted to take a walk. We'd done that a few times before. She said yes. We met at the park 2 blocks from her building at 4 in the afternoon. November light, that particular flat gray-orange that makes everything feel like it's almost over. She was in a coat I hadn't seen before. She looked tired, not sick, just the way someone looks when they've been carrying something heavier than they've let on. We walked. She was quiet in a way that felt like bracing. I think you've been pulling back, I said. She kept walking. She didn't deny it. I'm not trying to make it into something bigger than it is, I said. But if you're unsure about this, I need to know. I can't watch it fade and pretend I don't feel that. She stopped. We were on the path behind the main pond. Trees bare on both sides. She stood still, arms crossed against the cold, and I waited. I'm not unsure, she said. She said it to the ground first, then looked up. I'm scared. Of what? Of what happens when this goes wrong. She let out a slow breath. I like you. That is the actual problem. If I didn't, I'd stop texting and feel bad about it for 2 weeks and move on. But I do like you, which means this is the kind of thing that could genuinely hurt. Yeah, I said. Me too. That's not exactly reassuring. I know, but I'm not going anywhere. She looked at me for a long moment. I don't want to be the person who ruins something real because she couldn't get out of her own head, she said quietly. You haven't ruined anything. I've been shrinking it. Then stop shrinking it. She laughed. Just a breath of it, through her nose. The kind of laugh that comes when something is obviously true and part of you finds that almost funny. I held out my hand. She looked at it. Then she took it. We walked the rest of the path without talking. Near the gate she squeezed my hand once. I squeezed back. We walked to her building. She asked if I wanted to come up for a bit. I said yes. We made tea. Talked until past 8. By the time I left, something had settled back into place between us. Quieter than before. Steadier. I walked to my car in the dark, hands in my pockets. Just glad I'd said the thing. Spring came in uncertain and sideways, the way it always does in a city that's been cold too long. Cold in the morning, almost warm by the afternoon, cold again by the time the sun went down. My apartment had changed in ways I kept noticing without having planned any of them. A blanket on the couch arm that was hers. A second mug that had migrated to the front of the cabinet, where it now lived permanently. And a section of my bookshelf near the window, reorganized by color, which Brooke had done one Sunday morning while I was making eggs. She'd stood back, looked at it and said she liked it better. I looked at it too. Left it exactly how she'd arranged it. There are things you stop needing to be right about once you're paying attention to what actually matters. We had made it through winter. The November quiet and the walk in the park and the slow, careful months of figuring out how to actually be with another person when you'd both spent a long time being very good at keeping your distance. We had made it through a company meeting in January where we had to be purely professional for 2 hours in front of people who noticed things, and through a night in February when she got a call from home about her father and sat very still on my couch for a while, and I stayed nearby without trying to fill the silence because I had learned by then that not all of her silences were asking for something. Some of them just needed company. That took time to learn. I didn't always get it right the first time. She told me when I missed it, which helped more than she probably realized. 1 year after that Friday at Harlow's, I made a reservation. Same corner booth. I got there early, sat with a club soda and waited. The jazz was the same. The candle between the place settings already burning. I caught myself checking the door twice before I noticed I was doing it. That same old reflex from a night that felt both very recent and very far away, and it made me smile in a way I hadn't expected. She walked in right on time. Found me without having to look. Came across the room in that way she had, like she'd already decided where she was going. She sat down across from me. Looked at the untouched drink. Looked at the candle. Then looked at me, at the fact that my jacket was off and hanging on the hook and I was just sitting there. "You're not nervous," she said. "I'm extremely nervous," I said. She smiled. "The real one." I reached into my shirt pocket and set the ring box on the table between us. I'd written something to say 3 separate times and scrapped it every time because every version sounded like something I'd borrowed from somewhere else. So I just said what was in my head. I was about 30 seconds from leaving that night, I said. Sitting in the parking lot with the engine running, drafting a fake emergency text. And you were running 3 blocks through the wrong neighborhood in your work clothes because your phone was dead and you just were not going to not show up. I looked at her. I think about that more than I probably should. What kind of person does that? I knew it was you, she said quietly. From the moment Derek told me. I know that now. I opened the box. I don't want to keep being the guy who almost stayed in the parking lot, I said. I want to argue about books and eat cold diner fries and have someone rearrange my shelves without asking. For the rest of my life. I looked at her. So. Her eyes went bright. Not quite there yet. Close. You alphabetized your proposal, she said. Brooke. Yes, she said. Obviously yes. She was laughing and I was laughing and someone across the restaurant dropped a full tray at almost exactly the right moment, the crash cutting through everything. And somehow that was perfect. The jazz kept playing. The candle had burned nearly all the way down. She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. We raised our glasses a few minutes later. Club soda. Wine. She bumped hers against mine. Dead phone battery and a wrong street, she said. Dead phone battery and a wrong street, I said back. We drank to that. To the flooded living room and the November park and every ordinary evening that had quietly added up to something. To every moment that could have gone another way. To the version of you that doesn't leave the parking lot. To showing up anyway. 3 years later, the bookshelf in our living room was still organized by color. Brooke claimed it made the apartment feel calmer. I still claimed alphabetical made more sense. Neither of us planned on changing the other's mind. Our daughter was asleep upstairs. Our son was currently building something catastrophic out of couch cushions in the next room while Brooke tried unsuccessfully to stop him without laughing. Friday nights still meant diner fries more often than they probably should have. Sometimes, when the apartment got quiet, Brooke would lean against my shoulder and ask the same question she always did. Did you almost leave that night? Every time I gave her the same answer. Yeah, I'd say. Good thing you showed up anyway.